July 4th looked a little different this year. You know, up to 80%, 4 out of 5 fireworks shows have been reportedly canceled, but Americans still gathered to celebrate. We even heard Yo-Yo celebrating blackout, Vanessa celebrating with her friends. Now, experts worry that all these celebrations, even Yo-Yo's celebration or even Vanessa's celebration, it's going to add to the 2.8 million infections already in the United States, more than 130,000 deaths. I'm sorry, Vanessa and Yo-Yo, for calling you out on that. In the first 4 days of July, over a dozen states reportedly saw a record increase in coronavirus cases. Florida and Texas both hit highs on the 4th. In Arizona, close to a quarter of all tests coming back are positive. Meanwhile, finally, after 4 months, Vice President Mike Pence has called on everybody to wear a mask. This should have been happening since March. Why have this whole culture war about wearing a mask? And now governors, including Republicans, of at least 20 states have mandated it. Last Monday, even Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has told everybody to wear a mask. This is all, by the way, it's not even a culture war. It's a Donald Trump vanity issue. He doesn't like wearing a mask, so nobody else had to wear a mask, and people die and got sick as a result of it. It's really a Donald Trump vanity issue because he thinks he looks foolish wearing a mask. Well, maybe his makeup is coming off on it. Maybe some of his pumpkin makeup is coming off. I don't know. But it's really a Donald Trump vanity issue more than anything else for 4 months. Because he doesn't like the way he looks in a mask, so therefore no one should be wearing a mask. But masks save lives. Even if you've already been sick with coronavirus, mask saves lives because you don't know if you're going to get sick a second time from it. There's people who have been sick 2 times already with coronavirus, and the only thing we know for certain is if you wear a mask, the rate of transmission reduces by over 90%. So by you wearing a mask, you are saving another person. Even if you're confident that you don't have coronavirus, it doesn't mean that you won't get it. You didn't get it in the last 5 minutes. And also, even if you're confident that you've already had it and you're immune, you set an example for everybody else. Everybody wears a mask. That is why in Europe, it's why in Austria right now, there's not a lot of coronavirus. Why? Because everybody wore a mask. Okay? People followed directions. They didn't follow Donald Trump's vanity thing. He had a vanity thing. He doesn't like to wear a mask. Therefore, no one should wear a mask. It's us versus the media. Well, you know what? His vanity cost him his election, cost him lives, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lives. Congratulations, Donald Trump. America is #1 in the number of coronavirus cases.
Wow.
Trump, he's still sending mixed messages. In a July 4th speech at the White House, Trump claimed that 99% of the coronavirus cases are completely harmless. Let's watch this one.
Tested almost 40 million people. By so doing, we show cases, 99% of which are totally harmless.
It's not true. As a matter of fact, the FDA Commissioner, Dr. Hahn, who's standing next to Trump during all of this, he refused to agree with Trump. When asked, is that true, Dr. Hahn? Is that true that 99% of the people who get sick, it's completely harmless? And he says, I'm not going to answer that question. Now, the CDC stats, he says, I stand behind the CDC. He says 35% of the cases that people get are asymptomatic, which means that 1 out of 3 people who get coronavirus never feel a thing. Okay? But 2 out of 3 get sick, and approximately 4% of the people or so who get admitted into a hospital in the United States die from this. What do you think of all this, guys? Does any of this scare you? Or do you... Or
Absolutely.
you just... No, I'll say this. I mean, I think it doesn't scare millennials. I don't think millennials could care less about this, kids and millennials. And I'll tell you why, and you can tell me I'm wrong. Because millennials, college students, high school students, people in their 20s and even in their early 30s, they're saying, okay, if I get sick, I'll beat it. I'm not in the group of people who die from this. So it's like a cold. It's not the end of the world. And yes, that could be true. There are still young people who die from this. Okay, there are still, but the odds of dying from this are very, very low. So people say, I'm not going, people your age, I'm not going to sit at home. I want to go out and live my life. I'm a young kid. Why should I sit at home? Or why should I wear a mask? Why should I social distance? I want to have fun. I never get this year back again. Okay? I never get to have my senior year in high school. I never get to have my senior year in college. I never get to be in my 20s and young and single and love to mingle. I don't get that ever. Eventually I'm going to be married with kids. Let me enjoy my life right now. And I feel sad and bad for everybody like that. But what's missing in all of this is that 35% of you are asymptomatic, don't even realize you have it. You give it to somebody else, you could be killing them. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
For the record, Uncle Brad, my little barbecue did not look like some of those festivities that we saw where everyone was on top of one another. So I'm totally avoiding those kind of situations. That's where not to be in the midst of a pandemic. But I do hear what you're saying amongst my peers, unfortunately. And then when you try to be the one like, hey, you guys, like, just because we aren't immediately and directly affected by this at the moment, or so you think, like, it's still something that exists. It's a part of our day-to-day. It's something to be aware of. And if it is anything like a flu, and like, I still have people that are like, oh, this is the same thing they did with the flu. This is all like a media storm and X, Y, and Z. And like, okay, I'm not over 60, so I'll be okay. Unfortunately, yes, that is a lot of the conversation amongst my peers. But I feel like the selected few should just do their best to honor.
You know what? There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. My daughter, okay, who just turned 17, she is of the theory, and this is my own daughter, she thinks this is all a farce. She thinks this is all a conspiracy. She texts me every day conspiracy theories from the internet that this is all about the government trying to control us, and it's not as bad as everyone's making it out to be. And I think a lot of people your age think that. I don't know.
I think we thought that early on. A lot of us thought that, but that's crazy. I'm not saying that your daughter is crazy, but like
that's crazy though. I texted her back. I said, "You are crazy. That is ridiculous. Stop sending me BS." But I say, actually,
Yeah, but to think that now is actually it's ridiculous to think that now. I have a lot of friends that are essential workers that work at hospitals. Actually, just this weekend, I was with a lot of different trauma nurses and nurses that are literally working with COVID-19 patients since this whole pandemic started. And like we were talking about like some of the young ones that did die, and they were like, that's all the medical staff. They're like, if a young person with no underlying health issues died from this, that is all on the medical staff, but they're not, of course, they're not going to be held accountable for it. So this is not a conspiracy theory. This is all real. Yeah. This is very, very real.
Our knowledge of coronavirus changes on a weekly or even sometimes a daily basis. If you remember, originally we were told we don't have to wear masks. Now masks are the only thing that could actually prevent the transmission of diseases, which makes sense because otherwise, even from the beginning, doctors were wearing masks, okay? If you couldn't transmit it through a mask, why would a doctor even wear a mask? The doctors knew. And now they're saying wear masks. And before they said, well, you can only get it if, you touch a surface. Now you can touch a surface, it's okay. And then they say, okay, if somebody coughs in your face or talks loud. But now a group of international experts are publishing an opening letter to the World Health Organization and other agencies asking them to explain how the coronavirus transmits in the air. Now, Donna Milton, one of the authors and a professor from the University of Maryland, told CNN that airborne transmission word seems to be loaded. He said the group of 239 scientists from around the world wants the World Health Organization to be more willing to acknowledge the important role in aerosols, or whatever they want to call it, airborne transmission. Now, what this means is the virus is carried on droplets that come out of somebody's mouth and nose, and then these droplets fly in the air on dust, and the dust can fly all over the place. And these droplets can then eventually be breathed in by you. Now, the droplets eventually fall onto surfaces. They can be picked up by fingers. They can be carried in your eyes, your nose, your mouth. A loud bar, somebody who's talking loud, more likely to spread more droplets out of their mouth. All of this has never been explained to the public. What do you think of that? Yet you hear this for the first time.
I mean, honestly, like I said, I've been hanging out with a lot of different essential workers and nurses. They are still finding out a lot of different things. Like,
right.
They're like, medicine is scientific. Like, it's not, it's not guaranteed to work. Like, there's a lot that they today don't even know about it.
It is all
So
eventually discoverable and will be discovered by science. We just don't have the answer today. But it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how politics and conspiracy theories overtake science. I've never heard in my entire life until the last decade, between global warming and now coronavirus, that we have to defend science.
right.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the United States celebrated this Independence Day amid nationwide protests, calls for systemic reform. Yonathan had alluded to this earlier. In a short film released for this weekend, 5 young descendants of the famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass read and responded to excerpts of his famous speech, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." Now, Douglass delivered this speech on July 5th, 1852, to a group of abolitionists. Abolitionists are people who wanted to end slavery. In the speech, he asked all Americans to consider the country's long history of denying equal rights to black people. Let's watch a clip.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim.
Now, meanwhile, in Rochester, a statue of Frederick Douglass was desecrated and removed, perhaps as a retaliation for some of the Confederate monuments that were also desecrated and removed. Perpetrators remain unknown. Trump, he said, quote, "These anarchists have no bounds." I'm not sure if he was hopefully he was referring to the people who took down the Frederick Douglass statue and not the Confederate statues, but I'm not sure who he's referring to.
Right. I'm curious to, what are you gentlemen's thoughts on how people are reacting now, really realizing what some of these monumental structures, like people are really like protesting against monumental structures that have existed all these years, and now that we're becoming more aware and they don't necessarily fit the culture that we would want or are trying to create or make more awareness of moving forward. Like, what do you guys think? Like, I mean, how do you see it? Do you think it's part of the revolution?
It kind of reminds me, because it's a revolution. What monuments mean to me, and Yo-Yo, you can tell me otherwise, but what monuments mean to me are they're symbols of what you believe in your country and the pride of your country. And these are symbols that maybe in the past meant something different, but today, and maybe they didn't mean something different. Maybe people ignored it in the past. I don't know. But today they mean something very, very bad. They mean something that reminds people of a time in America that we don't want to remember. We don't want to honor people who owned slaves. We don't want to honor people who encouraged slavery. And these are people that we made monuments to, that we pass through every day. It kind of reminds me, in a way, when the Soviet Union fell. And maybe you guys are too young to remember this, because the Soviet Union fell in the late 1980s, early 1990s. All of Eastern Europe went from communism to some form of democracy. Now, obviously, Russia's basically an autocratic country, but many of the Eastern Bloc countries are democratic now. And as each country fell and there was protests to topple the communist regimes, the people who were protesting removed all the symbols of communism, including all the statues of Lenin, all the statues of the other communist leaders who came before the present communist leaders who got overthrown, because they didn't want those symbols. They didn't want to remember those symbols. So, statues mean something. And certainly, I don't think anybody is saying that we should overthrow the United States of America. And, that's what Trump wants people to believe. Anarchists, he calls people anarchists. But certainly, we as a culture shouldn't be honoring those statues. And I think as our political groups are behind what the people are saying. So when our politicians, when we have meetings and politics and hearings about what should we be honoring, who should we be honoring, that's kind of behind what the people are saying in the street. And that's why you see statues toppling. Let me tell you a little bit about Frederick Douglass, because you read about him in high school and elementary school, and then to be honest with you, I haven't heard his name in a long time, and now he's back in the news. He was a slave who escaped, and he is the first black man to run for vice president of the United States. He lost, but he was on a ticket. He was considered the best speech writer and best speech giver of the 1800s. It says here, taught others to read. He helped his wife escape from slavery. He took his name, by the way, Frederick Douglass took his name from a poem. He was deemed the 19th century's most photographed American. And he, like Yo-Yo, refused to celebrate Independence Day. He said he refused because there were many slaves that were still not emancipated during this time period. Now, Frederick Douglass recruited black soldiers for the Civil War. He served under 5 presidents in highly appointed federal positions, including U.S. Marshal, Minister, Resident, and Consul General to Haiti. And he was also, as I said, nominated for vice president on a major political ticket, but did not win.
And you would not have learned any of that in school except for reading it for yourself, just like Brad did, because they did not teach us all that in school.
You didn't learn about.
I had no idea that he was. I had no idea he was on a ballot.
I remember learning about Frederick Douglass in school, but I don't remember learning about him ever since. Or
Frederick Douglass was about 2 pages in our social studies book. Yeah.
Wow.
If that.
He was, by the way, considered at the time like the person to give a speech. He was the most riveting speech, and he taught himself how to read, and he educated himself by just reading high school textbooks at the time, because nobody actually taught him how to do it. So he must have been an extraordinarily smart man. Canada marked its Independence Day last Wednesday, July 1st, to commemorate Canadian independence. Young Wu, a CEO of Toronto-based Mars Discovery District, had a wonderful new commentary piece in Fortune magazine. In the piece, Wu, who writes he came to Canada from Taiwan in the 1960s to build a rewarding life, thanked America for self-destruction immigration policies, because that means Canada gets all of our immigrants. As he put it, you're shutting out the creators of your economic future, which of course benefits Canada. He wrote, "We Canadians should be quietly thanking you for your self-destructive immigration policies. They benefit Canada immensely, but friends, tell you when you make a mistake, and you're making a giant one by hardening your borders and your hearts to talented newcomers." So thank you, Canada, for keeping it real with us Americans. Thanks for watching. For more Brad Show Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.